go live, and I'll get my. Are we good?
Pretty good.
I'll get my hands ready to fight off the trolls. Okay, well, welcome guys. We are back again to talk. Why am I blurry? Hello? Thank you, camera. We're back again to talk about some more John Gwynne, this time with The Time of Dread. So the Blood and Bone series, book 1. So the continuation of, everyone's going to hold the book up. Mine's over there. The continuation series of The Faithful and the Fallen. So we'll start off some spoiler-free. That's the second.
Wrong book, Alan.
Wrong book, Alan.
It's the only one I have on my desk.
So we're going to start off some spoiler-free thoughts before we get into any spoiler talk. I'll make it very clear when we're going to spoil stuff. Up front, this takes place about 120, 130 years?
137? It isn't 137?
Is there an exact number?
Yeah, they do say
I just thought it was 130. I was like,
I think it's 135 and a half, but
I wrote it down. I don't know. I'll get back to you.
So 137 years, according to Alan, after the conclusion of the Banished Lands
2 months and
saga.
14 days.
Exactly. 37 seconds. So for those of you that don't know, our lovely panel, you've probably seen most of us before, whether it was from The Faithful and Fallen or Shadow of the Gods. But we have Patrick, Jimmy, Sarah, Alan, Abby, and Philip Chase joining us today. Subscribe to all of them. They are awesome people, and they have great channels. Welcome back, Patrick, from your war stories that you have for us. And glad to have you here. So,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
the first thing is, and this can just be kind of everybody answer this. We don't have to go completely around the room, but do you think people should read Faithful and the Fallen first? And I guess I would also say, do you think it's mandatory?
yes.
Yes.
All right.
I
Wow.
definitely
It is 137 years, I found.
Okay, thank you, Alan. How many months?
Okay, who's gonna answer this?
You should definitely read Faithful and the Fallen before you read. I don't understand why you'd read a sequel trilogy before the first one that was written. Like, I just don't. I don't understand why you would do that. Like, what would you want to?
And why would you want to? Because The Faithful and the Fallen is so good.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the issue is you have spoilers for The Faithful and the Fallen right from the beginning of Blood and Bone. So,
Sure.
if you're cool with that, then you could go ahead and just do a Blood and Bone first, but you're going to spoil the ending of The Faithful and the Fallen by doing that. So that's a major thing. Plus, you're going to miss the nostalgia factor when you're reading a Blood and Bone, because if you've read The Faithful and the Fallen first, you're going to just gush at all the references to the characters that you know so well from The Faithful and the Fallen while you're reading a Blood and Bone. So those are two big, I think, factors there.
Yeah, definitely. Like, not like having the what happened before, like knowing what happened before, like going into Drassel and seeing, the where we left off at Wrath. You're like, yeah, it's nice. And it's like the second season, like the sequel series of an anime where like everyone is like, there's so many people that are like the kids of the characters of the first one, which is something that I really like. But I mean, it doesn't mean anything if you haven't read the first one.
Oh, I love that. I love something like that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so like when The Great Coats continues, if you don't read the first 4,
If it ever gets released.
Yeah, it's in March now. Got pushed back in March.
But yeah, so I mean, I look at it as the main thing that you would miss probably from the first series is all of the world building, because pretty much all of that happens in Faithful and the Fallen, and it's less of a factor here because your focus is much more. It's a smaller scope, I guess, of like where you're focused in on, and you're not meeting all these different factions of people and kingdoms and like the big war that's happening. So I would definitely say read it first. You don't have to, but
I think because
it would be weird to go back after.
We all have read The Faithful and the Fallen first. I do wonder what the perspective would be like from someone that did just go in and read A Time of Dread first, and how they would feel, whether they'd be confused about the world at all, or like feel confused about the world building and the characters. And like, it's something that we can't really grasp because we read all of The Faithful and the Fallen before reading.
Yeah.
I think you would definitely miss a lot of the the foundational pieces and references probably wouldn't make sense, but you could treat it as like how a lot of fantasy stories do, where something happened a long time ago and that's like the history of the world. You could kind of treat it that way, but like these books actually exist. So you should probably just go read them. It's not like when you're stepping into another series and it's like 1,000 years ago this happened and now we're here. It's like, if that book also exists, then go read that.
But just the description of Drassel and the forest and Forn, like around it, it's so limited in this book. But like we spent so much bloody time in Forn and Drassel in the previous series that you have that that huge just epic forest and all of the stuff that goes on within it. Like that's all just already solidified.
Definitely. All right, so we have confirmed. Read Faithful and the Fallen first. If you haven't,
why would you not? Like I don't understand.
And you can now get those really nice broken binding hardcover editions with the sprayed edges that just look glorious.
Do we know how much they are yet?
Not yet.
I haven't seen the price.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
To answer
It's so
Alan's,
expensive. The shipping fee is so expensive to my place. Per book is £21 per book.
Yeah, it's a lot.
damn.
Is that how much? That's the shipping or the book?
That's just the shipment, not the book.
Wow.
So I have no idea. we'll just see, I guess.
We'll have to create a petition to get the books over to Patrick.
Yeah.
Hey, Patrick, you've been adopted by the Gwynne family. Don't you get a free copy?
Yeah.
I
You
really
just show
should.
up at the house and be like, "Hey, you guys got one for me?"
He just gets a standard issue Battle Axe and Shield. That's it. And you enter the Gwynne family.
All right, so read Faithful and the Fallen first. Thank you, Andrew, for confirming that for us.
Yeah.
So
Are there just three of us that haven't finished the series? Is it just me, you, and Philip that have not?
for
finished?
Blood and Bone, yeah. Yep. Just us.
But have you read A Time of Blood, Alan? Because you have the book now.
No, I've read nothing, Patrick. Like I've never read a book in my life, and I'm never going to read another book in my life because, like, why? I don't know why life is a thing where it's like, hey, you know what you should do? You should do stuff besides reading. Like I can't. I've had I'm trying.
Ghana, the never-ending book.
I hate my life.
Oh my gosh.
I feel like this was a personal attack. What's happening?
No, I have not. It's sitting on my desk. Like it's there. It's been like, hey, guess what? It's another book you have to read in August, along with the other 8 that you already can't get to.
Stop putting yourself into so many different reads. That's the issue.
Well, I'm fine for a month if I could ever get through the thing I promised to the month before. Instead, they roll over, and now it's created just a pile of backlog.
Gonna get to the end of 2021 and be like, here's the 45 books in December that I have to read.
Pretty much. It's accurate.
So then piggybacking off of that, so how do you all feel the time jump was actually handled then? So conclusion of Wrath without spoilers, we know what happened. Go read it if you haven't. So now jumping into the Banished Lands 137 years later, how did you feel that was handled as far as introduction to new characters, what the world looks like, all that kind of stuff? So I guess we'll kind of go like, I don't know. How should we do this? It's a T shape now. So let's go with Petrick first. How do you think it's handled?
Yeah, do the snake.
I might go with Petrick and then Abby and then Sarah and then Philip and then go back to Jimmy and then skip Alan because he doesn't read. So
I'm going right.
Petrick, yes.
Yeah, I think it was handled really well, and this is related to the previous question. Like Abby said, for those people who haven't read The Faithful and the Fallen first, they have mentioned that they can enjoy this one very much. Although I do think that you should really read this one first. But yeah, the time jump is handled really well because, well, people can jump into this one. But the one thing that's really different about this and The Faithful and the Fallen, in my opinion, is that A Time of Dread is so much darker than The Faithful and the Fallen. At least in my opinion. I think it is John Gwynne's darkest book, I think. A Time of Dread is the darkest one, in my opinion. And if you come into this one expecting that The Faithful and the Fallen will be the same as A Time of Dread, it won't be the case. As for the story, I think all the introduction were handled really well, and all the reference to The Faithful and the Fallen were done so amazingly. Every reference to the name of the characters gave me joy. That's my perspective. So, who's next?
I think he said Abby.
Me. Okay, me. Right. I think the time jump was done really well. And I liked that it's 137 years into the future. And I like that all of our characters in Faith and Fallen, like their stories are wrapped up, like they're finished. Like we're not trying to bring them back or anything. It's not as though we're bringing those characters back, but I liked having the references to them and like occasional sort of cameos from people that are long living. So I really did like it that The Faithful and the Fallen was completely finished, and then this is a new story with new characters as a whole. And I did really like seeing how you could see like the changes in the world, or like how the world now, 130 years into the future, is viewing that history that we lived through in The Faithful and the Fallen, and how for them it's only a few generations back, and that they can look back on it and see how the history has been written for them, and how the different perspectives of that history is, like whether you're following depending on the characters and where they are in the world.
But then he gives us, but he does give us the one link to the previous series, who was there for the events as our kind of like she's us. She's like, hey, I was there. It's like, we were too. We were at the Battle of Drassel, and all that stuff.
Or like when you see Balor One Eye, and you're like, yes, you.
Yeah. So I mean, without spoiling anything, obviously the characters that you will see coming back are not human, because they are there's ogres, giants, things like that in this world that live a long time. So, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it made me sad that right at the beginning of the book, they're just like, oh, yeah, by the way, like all your favorite characters, like they don't exist anymore. They're dead.
It's like nostalgia for them. Like I have this, like when you have those little moments where they're looking back on them and you're like, oh, the nostalgia of that series. But also, I wouldn't have liked it. I don't like it when you have books that continue on and you could end up like, I don't know, if you have a continuation to a series, it's only like 10, 15 years after the end of it. And then they go and like kill off the characters that you loved in that whole series. And then it's just annoying because you're like, that story was finished and they had their happy ending. And I want their happy ending to like stay as their happy ending, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Sarah?
I agree with what Abby said. So it gives you a good perspective on history and how people who are affected differently by events can experience that history in different ways. And I think that reflects back to a thing that happens in real life sometimes, is that depending on what side of a conflict you're on, you can interpret that and frame it in different ways. And we're given such differing perspectives in this book that we get to see how people manipulate what happened for their own purposes, which is a really interesting perspective to have. And I think that it gives us a more nuanced approach to what good versus evil is than we got in The Faithful and the Fallen. And so I think that it sets that part up really well. And I like having that time skip, because even though politics is not a huge focus for John Gwynne, it's obviously much more action heavy. I think that we're able to see a little bit of that tension between the various groups of people in the book. And I don't think that would have worked as well if it had immediately followed The Faithful and the Fallen, because we still would have been caught up in the same emotions and conflicts and beliefs of the characters that we knew so well. But now we get to see what the dreams and the goals of the people that we left in the past book, how they have transformed and how they have changed and how they have manifested in the various areas in the land. So I thought it was a good choice. I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it as much if it had just followed the same characters a couple of years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about you, Philip?
Yeah, so, I'm going to riff off of what Sarah just very brilliantly said a moment ago about, you can see how, and we're not doing spoilers, right?
Not yet. We will
but for Faithful and the Fallen either, right? I don't want to spoil that for anyone who hasn't seen or read.
We can give a spoiler warning if we want to, or we can just in a couple minutes we'll just go full spoilers.
Okay, just want to make sure, because I don't want to spoil anything for anyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can see how the crisis of the present in A Time of Dread is very much a product of what happens at the end of The Faithful and the Fallen. You don't necessarily realize that at the end of The Faithful and the Fallen, there are the seeds of this future crisis, but they are there. And I like how, especially in the last two books of The Faithful and the Fallen, John Gwynne does start to upend the tropes a bit. And that is something that is very much related to this trilogy, as far as I can see so far. The fact that he does play around with your expectations, and it's just interesting because in the first two books it feels tropey in a good way, but for me in The Faithful and the Fallen, when you get to Ruin, suddenly he's doing some interesting things with these tropes. And he continues to do that in Wrath. And I think that in some ways, what we have in Of Blood and Bone is the repercussions of John Gwynne getting really creative with these tropes. So I really like that connection that you have between these two series. So yeah, the crisis of the present is I think very much a product of the past.
Nice.
Very well said. Jimmy, Alan, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like the time jump, and I thought it was handled well. I think that whenever you have such a successful series that ended on a really awesome note, I thought the ending was very satisfactory. It's a very brave decision to then say, I'm going to follow that up and I'm going to do a new cast. I think that is something that is a tall task for any author, specifically here for John Gwynne, because of how beloved Faithful and the Fallen is. It is interesting. I've always been interested in the fact that after a war is won by whoever, that there are decisions that will have to be made, and there will be a power vacuum if not, right? We've seen that in history, and we've also seen that in other fantasy worlds. And I think the inspection of that is one of the more worthwhile things to do in a fantasy story. So the fact that we're not seeing the immediate repercussions, we're actually seeing what has happened, 137 years and 46 seconds later, is really cool. And I like the way the Banished Lands has changed. There's a whole new power dynamic that was not there before. And it also kind of starts to ask questions about maybe not free will, but freedom in the Banished Lands. And that is something that I feel has changed since the first quartet. I think in the first quartet, it was very much a free society. I mean, we had a caste system and that type of thing with people in power. But now it feels like evil has been vanquished, but we did lose some of our freedoms as a citizen of the Banished Lands. And we're seeing the impact of that on people, and people wanting to move to different regions, going into the north so that they could be free. It's pretty interesting.
Avoid the flesh tithe.
Yeah, very interesting, right?
Yeah.
So I loved it.
How about you, Alan? Good?
I mean, yeah, like most of my thoughts need to be in the spoiler section, because I'm eager to talk against you, Alex, because this may be my favorite first book, while it is your least favorite first book. But the time jump, I'll go ahead. I agree. I think the time jump was handled well. I'll go ahead and add like the sole negative. I think in a short book, there's a lot of words reserved for recapping events that I already knew about. And I understand why, because in case you read this first. But I'm also like, yeah, I read this, and really everyone else should already have read it. So, and it's fine, but I think it happened. I think there was more exposition devoted to recapping the Faithful and the Fallen than was probably necessary. Like a lot of times they say the same thing, and I'm like, we've already covered this. And so that would be the only negative thing that I would add, because I really liked the time jump. I agree with all you guys.
Alan, did you feel, and this is actually just a question for everybody in general, do you all feel like it's more beneficial to have like the tale so far at the beginning of a book, or would you rather have it sprinkled? I mean,
I like tale so far. I know that disrupts some people. Like I'm fine with like, thanks for recapping, let's move on.
Yeah,
I'm the same way.
I absolutely loved it. I think a lot of authors really need to adapt that into their sequels. Recently, I started the sequel. I dropped it because I remember absolutely no one.
Yeah,
I remember absolutely no one.
I'm fine with it either way, honestly, whether it's sprinkled throughout by the characters sort of recalling things, or even if it's before the prologue, if it's just like, here's what happened in the last series or in the first book, like I'm cool with that. And even like how Evan Winter did it in the sequel to Rage of Dragons, where it's literally like the first chapter or so, like they're telling another character, like, here's everything that happened. Like, I liked it. I understand it's probably bothersome to people if you don't read them like as they're published, because if you're reading them back to back to back, it's like, I just read this 10 minutes ago. It's like, but no one else did, because this was like a 2.5 year break. Yeah. So I think the timing of when you read it really impacts that too.
Yeah, binge to reading on publication date is such a massive impact on the experience that you have with whether it be the endings. I just went through Dark Towers, kind of felt the same way. And I think that it's not talked about enough. you know, it, like it's not factored into when people talk. But I was just curious because I agree with Alan. I think there was a lot of recapping here.
Yeah.
And I like to hear people's perspective because some people love to have it sprinkled in for conversation. But yeah.
All right, so let's do this then. So it's been about 20 minutes of non-spoiler talk. For the rest of these questions, we will dive into some spoilers because we're going to be talking about each POV, what's happening in the book. And if you have not read Faithful and the Fallen, we will probably be talking about things that happen in those because you kind of have to, because it directly influences things that happen in this. Jimmy's getting ready. So basically right with what Andrew's talking about, how you could easily expand with more POV and more page count. He's talking about easily adding another 200 or so pages because this is a shorter book, right? It was only, wasn't even 500 pages. It was like 400 something. And I think of Blood and Bone, A Time of Blood is only like 400 and something pages too. It's pretty short. So let's get directly into this then we can do this kind of all simultaneously. So like favorite POVs, least favorite POVs. Let's just talk about the characters that are in this world and some of your favorites, least favorites, things like that. And I'll just open the floor for Andrew.
Like I want to address what Andrew's saying about having more POVs. I actually liked that it was a smaller story with fewer POVs. In fact, I think the same story could have been told. And Alex, I think we're going to bump heads here. Sure. I think Bleda was superfluous to the story. I don't think he
get out. Get out here.
Bleda, sorry, like I like Bleda too, but he's the least interesting. And
Bleda was the second most interesting character that I followed.
Guys, he doesn't do anything for 400 pages. You guys know that, right?
Like zero respect for this opinion.
Everyone here, all you people who read at the beginning of the year who have clearly forgotten what happens in this book, you're all tainted by books 2 and 3. You're all tainted by what comes after, apparently, because you have forgotten the face of your father and the fact that Bleda doesn't do anything for 400 pages. And you know what?
I have my reading journal here with my love for Bleda written every line.
It didn't even need to be like this. It didn't need to be
hold
like
on.
this.
Even before that, so I have a question. So why is it that if you read the back of the book, Bleda's not even talked about? Maybe that's lending to Alan's point.
Because it's not important to the story.
As the first chapter of the book. So when you're looking at the back of the book and it says Sig, Riv, and Drem, I'm like, but there's 4 POVs. And you open up the book and it's Bleda. I'm like, yeah, Bleda is literally the first character you talk about in this book, and he's not even mentioned anywhere.
And I like the contrast between Bleda and Riv. Like I like the fact that Bleda's cold face and Riv is like complete, like hulking out, like addicted to drugs or in her rage.
Riv is like Tao.
Yeah, she's like Tao and Rin. She's a freaking like roid raging, you know, whatever she
gets triggered super easily.
We can get back to arguing about the characters. What I like about this story the most, I like that it's small and intimate. I like the cast of Faithful and Fallen better. Like, I think I liked the cast better. But I like the story being told here better because it just hits a bunch of buttons that I like. Like 2 organizations that are both the good guys who are at odds with each other. And, you know, one of them actually like good, like where Israfil is kind of this religious like zealot leader, and the great transgression and the Nephilim and stuff is what it kind of feels like. And then the Lovecraftian horror elements, like I really like when there's, you know, 2 forces working for the same goal, but they don't like each other. And so that kind of story appeals to me. It hit a lot of you know, buttons, like with what Jimmy's saying. They're losing their freedoms. They have to act a certain way because you know, Israfil demands it. But like any revolutionary leader, like you find the people who don't actually believe in the cause as strongly as you do, and so secretly behind your back they're violating all of the tenets you put out for your glorious revolution that, whether you like it or not, has brought peace, right? Like there is peace. Whether you like it or not, peace at what cost? Peace in our time. Thank you, Israfil. They should be thanking you. They should be offering things at your feet. You're welcome. Sorry we're killing the Kadashim who are murdering all of you. Sorry about that. Like,
how interesting that this is your opinion, and yet the character that we get who's thrown into enemy territory and has to form attachments to his enemies is the character that you don't like.
I don't actually like Israfil. Like he's like a super. But
I also
you like
that idea.
But people don't follow the plan, and they mess everything up. Like, who's his name? Cole? What's his name? Who's the freak? The one who like?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking spoilers, so
Yeah, he's the worst. Like, he's the worst. He's the like, no, it'll be fine. You can come to my apartment later. Oh no, it'll be fine. Like, I hate.
They have apartments.
I freaking hate them.
Let's go back though to that bomb you dropped earlier, Alan. The whole Bleda thing. We need to finish addressing Bleda.
Okay,
so Bleda is the first character we're introduced to.
What does he do in this story?
Okay, so I think what Sarah was just saying, and I'll let her finish saying it, but my feeling is that Bleda is important because if anyone is an outsider in this story, it's Bleda, and his perspective is extremely important, especially in Riv's development. So I don't know if that's where you were going, Sarah, but I'll let you kind of take over here because I think you were about to say something along those lines.
No, that is definitely what I was going to say. So like Alan, I really like, so what I like the most about this series is that you get these two opposing viewpoints that are supposed to be the good guys. So we get this infighting within the people who are supposed to share at least a common morality. And that is what adds a lot of the tension and the nuance. And that's why I really like this series. And I think that Bleda gives us a perspective inside one of those camps. He's taken out as someone who was supposed to be against this one main group, and he's forced to live amongst the people who have captured him, the people who have killed his family, the people who are enforcing these rules that go against everything that his culture believes in, and he has to live amongst them. And I think it's nice that we get him and his friend Jin, is that her name? The angry
Jin's
one.
The worst character in the entire book.
Yes, I agree. I really don't like her, but we get to see how he is able to form attachments, or he's able to recognize the good in the people that he should really hate more than anybody. And we get to see that growth of humanity, and we get to see how even when you don't agree with what people are doing, you can understand why they're doing it. And I think that moral compass is really important for the story. And I think that, like Philip said, he does add an important dynamic to Riv's development. I didn't really love Riv in the first book, but she did grow on me as the series went on. And I think a lot of that had to do with how the dynamic between her and Bleda grew and changed.
Yeah, so I think Bleda will definitely have more to do. And I haven't read all three of them yet, so I think Bleda's going to have more to do. It's very clear that there was a lot happening around him, and I know Jai's saying it sarcastically, but he kind of was a camera for the audience of just see all these things that are happening while not being directly impactful to the story necessarily as Riv might have been. But personally, Riv was the least to second least interesting to me.
I didn't like Riv either.
I didn't attach to her story of she just really wants to be in this army. I was like, okay, what else you got? I really want to wear that shield. Okay. And what else do you want to do? I seriously, I really want to wear that shield. I'm like, cool.
And I feel like Riv's POV is quite predictable in some ways in this book, because
it's
from the beginning, I was like, well, she's obviously a half-breed. She's a half-breed. Come on.
I did not get that from the beginning. I did get it from when she passed out.
Couldn't control her rage.
Oh, wings. Okay.
Yeah. So in some ways, because of that predictability, she wasn't as interesting as my favorite POV.
I think we all probably have the same favorite POV, but we'll get to it.
I'm just Riv, stop. Riv's about to go off again. Here we go. Riv, stop.
When she punches Ifrisel in the face, goes crazy on him.
I like that she beats the crap out of everybody who even messes with her, but just Riv, stop. I liked Bleda and Riv for me in this book were interesting mostly because of where they were, because I got into the cult of the Ben Alim and the religious clashing that's going on there. I really, really enjoyed that. And I also really like that he didn't give us a ton of information about why the Order of the Bright Star and the Ben Alim don't get along. It's understood, and he took it. And I know everyone wants to talk about Drem. I apologize.
We will,
but I know, it surprised me where it went with Israfil. I thought, and I was kind of colored by Dr. Philip Chase's review. I watched Philip's review of Time of Dread before I read it, and I'm like, oh, Israfil's going to be the big bad. Yes.
That's what I assumed too immediately, because like as soon as you're introduced to him in Bloodist Chapter, and it's like, oh, they just rule with an iron fist, and they're just going to kill people to stop the fighting and be like, yeah, that's my way. Like I'm in charge. I was like, he's clearly the bad guy.
It super surprised me when Israfil's like, well, we're gonna go and send you, like, we're gonna go link up with the Bright Stars, and I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, I mean, we don't get along, but we share a common purpose, getting the Katashim. And I'm like, oh, what an interesting layer's been added here. And then he shanked, and I'm like, oh, I guess it's just sex for everybody for the rest of the series. He gets real murdered.
Yeah. No, I think what you're talking about there, Alan, and I think you addressed it really well with some of your comments earlier about the bigger kind of social picture here. And a lot of it, I suspect, and probably Patrick, you would know about this, but I suspect this is a lot to do with the Milton influence in John Gwynne's work in general, the idea of the Puritans. So obviously, John Gwynne was inspired by Paradise Lost, and that was a pretty big nod in The Faithful and the Fallen. But it seems to me he was also inspired by the actual historical time period in which Milton lived, when you had the Commonwealth, when you had the Puritan takeover of England. And you look at a figure like Cromwell, and Oliver Cromwell reminds me a lot of Israfil in a way, because you had
Lord Protector,
Lord Protector. It's the same title. So he's this very righteous figure who knows what's right, and he, by God, he's going to impose it on everybody.
Yeah.
So Patrick, I don't know if have you ever talked to Gwynne about that? Do you think that's a valid?
When you vacation there and at the home.
I actually had never thought about this with John Gwynne, but I think it's very valid. I think it's really correct. And I also want to add about Bleda. But basically, I think Alan is kind of right on something, because Bleda in the first book, although I love every POVs in this book, but yeah, if I was to say the least interesting in this book, maybe it was Bleda and Riff. Okay. Hey, I still love them.
Betrayal. That is a betrayal, Patrick.
I would have said Riv and Sid.
Only in this book, only in this book, because I've read A Time of Blood and A Time of Courage, right? And Bleda definitely is one of my favorite in those two books.
That's what I assume.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, let's talk about it then, because don't tell me if there's a new POV or not. But we lose someone in this one. So let's talk about
Alex,
Sig.
just flip open Time of Blood, like it's Time of Blood. It's
Is
right
it like
there.
the first page?
Look at the fourth POV on Time of Blood. Like seriously,
Get the book.
it's so
Alan's
cool.
got it on his desk.
Let's talk about Sig. I didn't think Sig was that interesting. Go.
I agree.
I actually love Sig.
I love Sig.
Hey Alex.
Yeah.
Hey Alex.
I think that Sig was a trial run for Orca in The Shadow of the Gods in some way.
All right.
Okay,
Phil.
fine.
Bringing
Why
the-
did I get
bringing
up
the
there?
heater. All right. That's a pretty good point, actually.
I think Sig got more interesting as the book went on.
Mm-hmm.
Like-
I
At the beginning, I was a bit non-fussed about her and her plot, but I think when she started interacting with Drem and the conclusion, it all got very, very interesting.
So naturally, she had to die.
I think Abby brings up a very important part about John Gwynne's writing, is that the intersection of characters are 9 times out of 10 the moment where we go, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And as Sig went on and then she met Drem, I was like, I'm in on this little Calvary. And then she died. And I was like, God damn it. I actually wrote down in my notes here, and I kind of wanted to bring it up, because I was very high on this book when I reviewed it. If you look on my channel, I was very high on it, but there were things that felt different from Faithful and the Fallen. One, totally different type of story. We've kind of already established that. And I think people, if they don't have the right expectation going into this, it could lead to disappointment. But one of the things I said is I wasn't feeling as emotionally attached when the tragedy struck. I felt like I was kind of registering it, but I wasn't reacting to it.
Yeah.
I will say when Sig died, I reacted finally. I was like, and then I also developed a hatred for Fritha. So
Screw you, Fritha.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, so it was weird. I think John Gwynne took time with this, especially with a lot of the mystery. Like, I feel like he did mystery really well in this book, and Sig was a natural progression of how the book got better for me. And then whenever she died, I was like, oh, you got me. Like, you got me right at the end, John Gwynne.
I did not feel that much for Sig dying. I have to admit, it was one of the only times that I felt like emotionally manipulated by John Gwynne. Like, I was supposed to be sad, and I was not sad when it happened.
Same.
I liked Sig from the beginning. Sig was our link to the past.
But I feel like it could have been so much better because she was a link to the past via exposition. Exposition, that's the word.
No, like she was a weapon master from the big fort that
but like she wasn't cool enough in the original series for me to care that she was carried over. Like I would have wanted more of an attachment. I don't know. Like it was like, oh cool, Sig's back. Oh cool, Baylor's back. And then like I didn't attach to her story following Catersham. Which by the way, how many Catersham are there? Weren't they like basically wiped out at the end of Wrath, except for like pockets of them?
There's still a ton of them.
Are there tons of them?
Yes, because they all flooded through while freaking Cywin's trying to close the dang portal. They're just
I couldn't remember. I had it in my head that like there weren't that many left.
Like oil pump. Just like
okay. I thought this was like I thought this was like a season 8 Game of Thrones thing where like all of the Unsullied are dead, and then it's like, oh wait, no, just kidding. There's literally like 500,000 of them. It's fine.
Someone said in the comments that Sig is your window to Cullen, and I love Cullen. He's such a boob. Like Cullen is such.
I don't know. Andrew says he stinks.
Cullen is very infuriating.
Andrew's wrong. I know Cullen is infuriating. He wants so bad to be he wants to be Corbin. Like he thinks he's Corbin, like reborn. And he's just not. He's just like, I'll stop him. Ugh, stab in the arm. Ow. But he really wants to be like he's a good guy. He
has the right intentions.
Yeah, he does have really good intentions, but he's just a boob.
But
like
he's useless.
Just a clown. I love Cullen.
Cullen is more like what is Hallian's brother's name?
Connell?
Yeah, Connell. Yeah, I think he's more like his. Well, he's descended from Coralyn, of course, right? Cullen is. So I think he gets a lot from that side of the family. Yes. He reminds me a lot of Connell in a way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I just want my main cast again. I want Coralyn and Corbin and Storm and everybody.
Was Jimmy talking about the mystery? Like, was that you, Jimmy, talking about the mystery? I think it did really well. And then the reveal. Like, have y'all seen Hot Fuzz? Like, the greater good. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, he's freaking Sergeant Nicholas Angel showing up on the homeowners association meeting where everyone's like, I'm a Catersham. No, I'm a Catersham. The greater good.
You're right. It does.
It was awesome because I didn't see it coming, but I was like, holy crap, it's Hot Fuzz. And then Drem's Home Alone scene, of course. Where
because you asked Gwynne about it on Twitter, right? And he said,
I said, John, like it feels like Hot Fuzz. He's like, did you also get Home Alone vibes? I'm like, I did. Like,
I love Drem like rigging up his house.
Yeah. So let's talk about Drem now. Finally, 40 minutes into the podcast. Let's talk about Drem.
He's my favorite. I read this book back in like January, February. And when I was thinking back on it, all the memories that were coming back were all Drem. I was like, oh, Drem did this and Drem did that. And then there was Drem doing this.
Everyone's favorite.
Yeah.
No, everyone hates my favorite character.
Everybody but Sarah.
No one hates Bleda, Sarah.
Okay,
no one hates
fine. Bleda's my second favorite. But I think, so up front for me, Drem, I felt like the most real character and the most love put into the character. And I think that's because of a conversation that we had with John, because he based so much off of his son, Will. I feel like all of that love and care was put directly into the character. And that's why it felt the most real to me. And of course, we get his relationship with Olin, his father. And so, all right, let's talk about Drem now, because Drem's the best. Blood is cool too.
Can I just say something really quickly? Yeah. I love that he put all of this love and care into this character. And if you've read The Shadow of the Gods, you get a character based on the other brother who loves cheese.
Yep.
Alex, you hit the nail on the head there.
The thing is, cheese is a big thing in these books because Aspro likes cheese. Like, I remember messaging Patrick, I think, when I got to the point where Aspro was like, Oh, cheese! And he was like going in on the cheese in this book. Was it this book? Or was it just the book which got the cheese in it?
Azeroth's not in this book.
Yeah.
Abby.
Cheese. Which is the cheese? Which is the book with cheese in it?
I don't know anymore. I was talking about cheese.
Let's skip this topic.
Cheese is in the shadow of the gods, but
Yeah, we'll just go with that. There's lots of cheese in Shadow of the Gods. Ignore everything Abby just said because she's trying to.
But Alex,
I think cheese.
Alex, I think you'd hit the nail on the head there when you were talking about Drem and his relationship with his father, Olin, because that's what made Drem special to me, was that relationship. And as you've already said, Gwynne, in some degree, based the character Drem on his own son.
Yeah.
And so the father-son relationship there was just so special and so endearing. It was a beautiful part of the book, actually. And I think that was why, for me, Drem was probably my favorite character. Plus, his personality is great, but it's that relationship, I think, that really brought it over the top for me, and that's why maybe the most memorable part of the whole book was the specialness of that relationship. And it does. Somebody left a comment. I think it was Andrew. Olin's death hits you so hard because that relationship is so special. But I can see why Gwynne did that. Besides the fact that he loves to break our hearts. The fact is, for Drem to kind of grow up and be, this, important character for us, he has to have that protector kind of out of the way, and that's a sort of classic trope in a way.
Tried and true trope. You gotta the old wise protector needs to pass.
Yeah, and it's his father in this case. So it's a psychologically important thing to have that happen, I guess, for this character. So I'm really interested to see where he takes Drem in the next book.
He's also, Olin was like, again, a connection to the Banished Lands that we didn't know about right away because people know who he is.
Yeah.
From someone who has Asperger's, reading Drem was really, really interesting because I've never read a fantasy book that has a spectrum character that's like.
You think it was done well?
Yeah, it's very done well, especially for a high functioning, intelligent character on the spectrum. Because Drem's not dumb. I'm not saying when you see spectrum representation in fantasy, it's usually not like lesser functioning, like they are kind of invalid, if you will.
You can see that he attaches to things.
Correct, but you recognize things when when Olin keeps being like, dude, like I know, like yes, they were wrong, but you shouldn't say it. Like it flashes me back to being a kid where I was told the same stuff. Like yes, everyone no, keep it to yourself, say it in your head. And then he says it in his head because he has to say it because he talks about that pressure building up. And it's literally the same thing I have to tell my wife. Like I have to say it or the pressure builds up.
Someone.
Yeah. And what made the relationship with Olin even more special for me is that Olin understands him. And I feel so bad when Olin's gone because it's the only person that understands him. And you look for that because it's so hard to explain why your brain works differently and why you think about things differently than the general populace. And it is such a rare thing to have someone who just understands that. I just felt so bad for Drem. And that's why he was kind of lost after Olin died, for a hot minute. He didn't know what to do. He's like, he knows his home, and that's a big thing too. You don't like change. You glom on to what you know. That's the safe thing, and he doesn't want to leave. And he ends up staying way longer than he should. But I thought it was really, really well done. I liked Drem a lot.
That relationship is definitely the most emotional in the book that I felt. Someone wrote a comment, I think, saying that Olin's death affected them more than Sig's death. And it was definitely like that for me because that relationship was built up so well. And that's another reason that I really appreciate Cullen for all of his derpiness. He is a connection for Drem. And I think that when I finished this book, I was really looking forward to seeing how their relationship was going to build and how they were going to support each other moving forward. So I was glad that Cullen was a character to be able not to replace his dad, but to be somebody that he could be comforted by or develop some attachment to.
Yeah, especially with Sig out of the way. Yeah.
Jeez, savage. Now that she's gone.
So much hatred for Sig.
I like
Sig was
Sig.
boring.
I'm with you, Patrick. And
Sig
I
was
like
boring.
the color was so nice to Drem. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, that was cool. Andrew brought this up. Yeah, can we talk about how he got hung twice?
Poor guy.
First time?
And the second time he was literally like, "Oh, this again." I was like, "Yep, this is happening again." Because he went through some pretty nasty stuff in this book.
Yeah,
I mean,
I like that it was revealed that the whole town was, hot fuzz, because I was because one of my least favorite tropes in fantasy is people who clearly know what they're talking about warning people and having the people in charge being like, "Oh no, it's fine." Like, "Oh, you're just so." I hate that. Like, I hate it. It's so because it happens twice. It happens with Riv, and it happens with Drem.
Yeah.
And at least the Drem one makes sense. They're like, "Oh no, the Catacomb, no," and that made sense. But like Riv, like literally saw, the freaking monstrosity things and is trying to warn, and they're like, "Oh, Riv just getting worked up," and I hate it. Like, I hate it. I'm like, he was literally there. You have no reason to discount what she says. She's not getting mad. Like, I understand if she's mad that the lawn isn't cut right, like, just ignore her. But like, there's no reason to discount it. But anyway.
So then let's talk about the horror aspect that people like to mention, because we said this, it's a time of dread. It's pretty dark. It gets pretty grim and out there at certain points. So let's hit on the horror aspect then, because I'm not really going off these questions. It's kind of like what's something that the book does well and that could have been done better. We'll get to that in a second. But this was in Drem's POV, right? With when he stumbles across whatever this horror show is. So let's see, Patrick, thoughts on the whole, like, whatever the place was that he found where there were these like experimentations happening.
Yeah, in the mine, right? I think it's been a while, but I don't remember too much about that one now because it's been years since I read this one. But as I said earlier in this video, I think Time of Dread is really the darkest. Not in just storyline. I mean, Malice also contain. We can talk spoilers, right? For the first one. Yeah. Malice also contain a lot of deaths, right? Especially at the end of the book. Mm-hmm. But in the Time of Dread. But in Malice, the entirety of the tone never felt dark. It never felt dark, and there isn't any horror elements, in my opinion. But in the Time of Dread, in the mine, there was a definite horror elements. Although I don't think it really belongs in the horror genre. But the entire book, the entire tone, it always felt so kind of depressing and kind of dark. Yeah, and that's why I always say that A Time of Dread is John Gwynne's darkest book, in my opinion.
I mean, even before we'll talk about the mind in a second, but even just the premise of it, that like you have these like angelic beings that control everything, and it's their religion and their way, and if you war amongst yourselves, they're just gonna come in and slaughter indiscriminately and be like, "Okay, are we cool now? Like, go back to work. Oh, by the way, your son is coming with me. Like, he's my slave now." Like, so the whole setup is pretty terrifying. But yeah, the whole thing in the mind with poor Drem's what's the girl's name that he liked?
That was a big surprise for me. I had no idea. Like, when we found out that Fritha was evil, I was like, "But what?" But no.
So, what exactly was she creating? Were they Catacomb, or are they just?
They're monstrosities. Like they're just like they're. What they are is cannon fodder, because the Catacomb don't have an army. Like, if there's going to be a big battle, they have to create cannon fodder. And this is, I mean, this is evil villain 101. Like, you gotta have an army if you're going to go to war with the good guys who do have an army. Yeah. And it's just like just the descriptions was very creepy, very Lovecraftian. Yeah. The one thing that I was like, whatever character sees them thinks about them as ferals before they're ever called ferals, which was weird. I'm like, the bad guys call them ferals, and I'm like, how do y'all know? Did y'all coordinate on like what to name these? So that was weird, but I really liked like the horror stuff and the darker element, because it was just this dark, like creepy mystery that just felt so different than Faithful and the Fallen. Just tale versus good side fighting evil side. Now they're going to be, brute force didn't work, so now we've got to, like, be all scheming about it and come out of the darkness this time.
Yeah.
A lot of the horror element comes from or is related to the theme of hybridity in here. Meaning, I mean, when you look at what the Katashim are up to, there apparently are half-breed Katashim, and that's somehow an abomination, and that's a horrible thing. Yeah. And of course, there are half-breed Benolim, which is the big secret, right? That, of course, I guess most of them have been killed as infants, but this is interesting because we're supposed to think of these hybrids as monsters, but Riv is a half-breed, and we like Riv. So it's kind of cool, I think, and interesting what he's doing with this theme of hybridity in here.
Yeah. Well, right? Because for Riv particularly, like, you don't learn until almost the end of the book, obviously, that, like, it's hinted at and you fully see, like, her wings and everything at the end after she wakes up. But, like, you even see that earlier where you kind of get a feel for, like, is it Israfil or Ifrasil? I always mess it up.
The first one.
Israfil?
Yeah, I think it's
yes. Okay. Well, you see, like, how he punishes people for, I think the one Ben Elam had, like, kissed a girl.
Right.
And they, like, rip his wings off. And it's like, oh, that's what we're doing. And then when they're having that conversation later where he's like, you saw what he did to him when he kissed somebody. Like, what do you think he's going to do to you for having, sex with a person? Like,
kill you.
It's going to destroy you completely. So, I mean, you can just see, like, how dreadful it is living under them. But now, like, with Israfil dead, and you have arguably a worse person stepping in to take over, like, there's somebody in the ceiling.
That's my kids. They just got home.
So I'm wondering, for those of us who haven't, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, just to finish that thought, at least what I was thinking about, there's a biblical aspect to this too, where according to tradition, a lot of the bad stuff that happened prior to Noah was because angels had been breeding with human beings.
Nephilim.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what led to all the wickedness, which led to the flood, which again is a theme in The Faithful and the Fallen, right? Yeah. Very much the gods sort of wiping out the place and kind of starting over again from scratch because of the wickedness. Gwynne's definitely getting a lot of that from biblical sources.
And what I find interesting about where the story's going is that it just hits a lot of things that I really like in fantasy. Like Alex, you said, they killed the old guy and replaced him with someone who's, arguably even worse. But that's not how the populace is going to view him. No. He has much more freedom ideas. Like, he's going to free them from this oppressive rule. Like, they can do more. They're no longer prohibited from certain actions under Cole's rule. But we see him and we're like, this is going to be so much worse. Like, this is going to be so much worse.
Because he's not just sinister, he's smart about it. So he can play the, like, I'm here to help you, but manipulate you more than anybody else ever did.
Yes, you get that superficially charming part of the antisocial personality. That's why they can take advantage of people so well.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a really smart politician, right? Where there's somewhere you're just like, this guy's clearly terrible, and then there's one that's like, well, he sounds nice. It's like, yeah, but look at what he's actually doing. It's like,
he's gross. Cole did it with Riv's mom and is trying to do it with Riv, and I think did it with Riv's sister too. Like, Cole is just like, hey, come over. I've got like
to his apartment, right?
You need to stop that voice.
I've got a lava lamp and a bean curtain. You could just hang out on my bean bags. Like, it's so gross.
I actually suspect that Riv's sister might actually be her mother. I don't know, but
oh no!
I'm just totally suspicious, but I haven't read the rest of the series, so that's a speculation on my part. But I don't know. But yeah, he's a creep. Cole is a creep.
And then who would you think is Riv's mother? Not mother, father.
Cole.
Why did Riv's mom kill, like, the nice dude? I didn't understand that part. Like, why did she just completely shank that guy?
Because she had put her, basically it was a difficult, horrible thing for her to do, but she had decided to support the usurpers. She had thrown in with them. So, and he was just wrong place, wrong time in the way.
Okay.
on the wrong side. So yeah, that was a tough thing for her to do, but had to do it, kind of thing.
I hate
All right.
usurpers.
So bringing us back to some of these. So I think we've kind of covered what some things that the book does really well, because we've kind of been gushing over most of the book. Does anybody want to call out anything else specifically that you thought this book, maybe either compared to Faithful and the Fallen or just on its own, did particularly well in your opinion?
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about the mystery a little bit more, because so in Faithful and the Fallen, even from the set out, I mean, we're getting introduced to the characters, but we know who's an ass and who isn't. Pretty
For the most part, yeah.
Pretty solidly.
Yeah.
Alex, one of your big complaints with the book is that you felt like it lacked a compelling villain. I've seen Andrew from chat also say that. I've seen a lot of people say that. They feel like the antagonists are suffering here. I think that John Gwynne went into this with a different mindset. I think he wanted to make the reader think a little bit more. And it's very much a book one type syndrome that we get, where we're figuring things out. And then at the end of this book, it's like, oh. Yeah. And that is something he also did in Shadow of the Gods, which I saw a lot of people say, I wanted more intersection of the characters, didn't want to wait to the ending. And they wanted more POVs from villains, right? So I think the mystery is a byproduct of John Gwynne wanting to do something different here and not make it so much black versus white, but rather a bit of gray. Because even though the Ben-Alim are kind of, for lack of a better term, jerks, I mean, there is somebody has to rule.
They're the good guys.
Exactly.
Peace in our time, Jimmy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's like these are interesting questions that we have to ask, and we ask in our world as well. And it's not always black and white. It's not always straightforward about who is right and who is wrong and who's making the best actions. So I think that's part of the mystery is the questions that we're having to ask ourselves as the reader. And I will say, I'm no spoilers for Time for Blood, but I thought book 2 is whenever it felt more like classic Gwynne. Yeah. And I think for book 2 and 3, you feel home with John. He just made you do a little bit more legwork to get to that point. And I like that because it feels a little bit more earned whenever I absolutely detest Fritha, who then becomes a lot more nuanced in the future books. So
yeah, I mean, I kind of expect that to be the case, and I feel like I'm probably going to like A Time of Blood and A Time of Courage better, since everybody seems to think A Time of Courage is like his best work that he's done.
It's amazing.
Because like I had the issue that I had was because, and of course I can't help but compare it to Faithful and the Fallen. I mean, I read most of that this year, but even on Malice, I had issues with, like structure and pacing wise, but like I generally overall enjoyed it. I saw kind of in general where it was going. When I came to this story, I was looking at it and I was just like, okay, the Kadoshim, yeah, we're still trying to kill the Kadoshim, but like, who's the villain? Who am I trying to like root for to take down? Mm-hmm. And you don't get a lot of that until later, because I thought it was going to be Israfil, and then he gets shanked. And then I'm like, okay, so it's going to be the new guy taking over, most likely, and you still have to deal with Kadoshim. But like, while you're going through, like, so many of the POVs felt sort of just like their own stories that were just kind of happening in the world. And there was no, like, we need to go defeat, like, there was no Nether or Rafe or, Lycos, or like this whole band of villains that we had in The Faithful and the Fallen. There was no one for me to like really hate and like want to see taken down. And we weren't getting that dynamic, which we probably get in book 2, because you have Fritha POVs. I wasn't getting that out of this book. So that's why it kind of disappointed me, because expectations were probably too high, honestly, because I love Gwynne's writing. But just a compelling villain was seriously lacking to me. And then I didn't love Sig or Riv's POVs. So like, that's what kind of dragged the book down a little bit. But honestly, I would love to hear, a rebuttal to my lack of compelling villain that I think.
Alex, that would have bothered me also. Sorry, go ahead, Abby.
I was going to say, don't you worry about having a compelling villain, because I really don't like Fritha.
That would have bothered me, Alex, if not for the specific things that this book is about, like just the two competing good guys, and the religious kind of zealotry, the having to have the draconic fist, but it's working, but people are unhappy about it. Like, I love that kind of political exploration. So that was interesting enough to carry me through, because I really usually don't like books that don't have a specific villain, because villains are a good villain can make up for a crappy hero, just in my opinion.
For sure.
But the rest of the book, what it was about, like kind of hand waved it away, and so I didn't really notice the lack of Nethers and Lycoses and Jaels and all that stuff. So I enjoyed it. Like I said, I like the story better, I think, in this one, but I like the cast of Malice better. But I don't know. I really like this book.
I think Jimmy and Alan, both of you said it really well. What you have here so far anyway in A Time of Dread is, I think Gwynne is more interested in not so much in exploring villains, but in exploring the grays in the so-called, good characters. So yeah, I think he's doing a good job with that. And so that kept me entertained, was the exploration of how we are all morally complex and nobody is purely good. And a lot of times it's a matter of perspective, because you have Bleda, for example, and Riv, who we both like, and they're both good, but their worldviews actually, especially in the beginning, are very conflicting. Yeah. So, who's good, who's evil, those words don't really apply. We're all complex human beings. And I think that's what he's exploring more in here.
Yeah, for sure.
Another thing, if I could jump back in real quick, is the Faithful and the Fallen is very much about prophecy. And because of that prophecy, we read it and we take that perspective of the prophecy, right? So we know that the Bright Star is good, right?
Morning Star is also
Red Rising. I'm reading Red Rising, so that's why. But so we know the Bright Star from our perspective. We just believe that it's good as the reader, because that's the perspective we're given. Whereas this, we're very much just kind of tossed into the aftermath, and so now you decide. So John Gwynne gives us more of a rope, and I do think that he was hoping that people would give him a longer leash with setting some of these things up in book one, because of the trust that he earned with Faithful and the Fallen. But I do think it's just expectations wise, they're just totally different. And
I think for me, it was to have a break. Like, I finished Faithful and the Fallen, I think in October, and I started this in February, so I had, I think, 4 months off, or maybe more than that, between the two. And I think that was good that I had this break, whereas I don't know if I would have enjoyed this as much if I'd done straight in, because then I would have been missing the characters more from Faithful and the Fallen, I think.
Yeah, I think that might be partially my issue. When did I finish Wrath? It was
recently.
Somewhat recently.
Yeah, I took a year off between the books, and I'm very glad I did.
Yeah.
I think it had to be expected to have that gap. Appreciation for these characters, because I definitely still missed our cast from Faithful and the Fallen.
Yeah,
you will always miss them.
And I have heard, for me it wasn't a problem, but I think I have heard critiques that all of the cast in this series are young or younger, and there isn't an older perspective, how in Faithful and the Fallen there was Matt Quinn, who had that older perspective, and that isn't really included here. They're all very young-ish characters.
Although
we
they're
had Sig, but rest in peace, Sig. So, but yeah, I mean, that's a good point. They are all pretty young, because Drem's early 20s. I think Bled is even younger, and Riv. I mean, they're what, 18, 19-ish, probably when it starts.
They're like 16.
I think they're 16.
Okay.
Well, we know how Gwynne kills off parents in his books. So,
it's like a Disney movie.
Too long.
It's like a Disney movie. The parents have to die so that you can have a story. That's just how it works.
It is a very YA-ish trope, isn't it?
That's just a story trope in general.
Yeah.
Make your hero your parents are either already dead when the book starts, or they have to go at some point.
Yeah.
Or just be off somewhere else. Like Bleda, his mom's alive, isn't she?
Yeah.
He just got taken. So who knows what she's doing?
Probably vacation.
I mean, there are parents, Bleda's parents are oft seen. Riv has a mother.
That's true.
Drem's dad was rest in peace.
Yeah. Drem's dad is gone. So, I mean, I guess for those of us who haven't read the series, who do you think is ultimately the bad of the series by the end of it? Is there gonna be this thing of the Catashim are not actually that bad, and we find out that there's more to them, and
it's clearly Azeroth.
Poor Alan, I feel like you've been dying inside ever since that happened.
it's really fine, Abby. Because is there
I'm
anyone
so
here who
sorry.
didn't think Azeroth was coming back? Like,
I
it's that's not surprising.
Yeah.
Especially considering how much of a focus it was in this book with Olin talking about it and building a Starstone axe or whatever
that immediately got shanked. I don't understand what you're doing, Olin. You created the one thing that can free him, you weirdo. Just throw it into the freaking ocean. I don't understand. I'm creating the only thing that can free the big, bad, evil guy that no one has been able to do up to this point. And I will totally be able to protect it from the hordes of evil people who will then be hunting me for it.
Flawless
You're a
plan.
freaking farmer.
Bold strategy. Let's see if it pays off for him. Yeah. I mean, obviously that's not going to go.
A trapper,
well.
sorry. He's a trapper.
Freaking farmer. He's not a farmer.
He's the trapper. He almost got torn up by the bear, and he's going to handle all the Katashim gunning for his sword.
It's a big bear.
It's a big bear, man.
It's a very big bear.
Drem knew it was what? Throw it in the... He's like, no, but then sometime 1,000 years from now, it might be uncovered, and they'll get it. Well, you just gave it to him in a week. Better 1,000 years apiece. Give Israfil a chance to do his job.
Well, Israfil's dead, so he didn't really control that.
Well...
Did he though?
What'd you say?
Nothing.
Really, guys? You guys are doing this crap.
If Azeroth comes back, will Michael come back too? I don't know. I mean, I haven't read, so
I would assume so.
yeah.
We'll see.
Here's why I thought Azeroth and Michael were going to come back. Because John Gwynne lists them in the cast. Like, he lists them in the cast. And he doesn't list people in the cast who don't exist. Like, he doesn't. Like, who don't appear in the books.
Well, they're statues, though. I mean,
they're alive. They're just encased in Starstone.
I mean,
they're in eternal combat. I don't care. Michael can die anyway. Who cares about Michael?
Are you
Cut his head
kidding?
off.
Michael's nicer than freaking Israfil and Cole, and he's also nice Corbin.
I like Michael.
He manipulated Corbin the entire time. Cut his head off. Let Azeroth rule.
Corbin was dumb.
Michael is
Let's see what happens.
of the Ben Elim.
Michael didn't try to do a
Michael's
single
humanity.
character in Faithful and the Fallen. Not one.
What's something this book does really well? Making us fight.
But I thought Michael was he showed us in Faithful and the Fallen that the Benelim can appreciate human emotions. I thought that he did that really well. I really liked Michael in the Faithful and the Fallen.
And not be a perv.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A plus.
The thing is, if you compare Michael in Faithful and the Fallen to the Ben Elim that we have now, I think it shows how good Michael is.
Yeah.
Well, because they've been ruling for 137 years, so they're all like pompous and
Power
egotistical.
changes them.
It does.
Yep.
They weren't that nice to Michael.
They weren't nice to begin with. Yeah.
Well, they also don't relate to human, humans really.
Yeah.
And they think their squabbles are all pointless. And to a point, they're kind of correct. Like, why do you guys keep fighting?
Yeah.
Just stop it. Like, there's no reason. You guys are always bickering. And if you look at our world, I mean, that's what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Even in the living under literal angels that are controlling the land, it's like they still have their petty squabbles.
It seems obvious. Like, hey, just don't fight, and we'll be good to go. And it's like, okay, yeah, we're fine. You know, you really pissed me off at dinner last night. You know what I mean? Like, we can't let it go.
Yeah. And it shows that, like, without that evil on their doorstep, because at the very first pages of the very first page of Time of Dread is that account of Gullah or whatever it is, like saying that what we're doing isn't working. Like they're literally like just cutting us down in drove. It's time to withdraw and wait for an opportunity. And that's the master plan, because now that the Katashim aren't in the forefront, they're just kind of bogeymen now, right? Or they're way out in the wilderness. Oh, not in my town. It's not here. Now the humans can get back to, being pissed off about dumb crap that nobody cares about. And Israfil's like, guys, no, like, they're there. You need to fall in. Time to report for training. They're like, well, why? Why? We haven't seen a Katashim in like 30 years. Like, why do I have to do it? It's hot and I'm tired. And Israfil's like, guys, they're gonna come back. But that you're mean. And and now they're back. And what do they have? They have nothing. They have a freaking like ragtag cut in half, schismed fighting force. You know what I
Don't
mean?
worry, Cullen has the faith that he can just kill them all.
Look, Cullen's got it. Like, just give Cullen a sword, he'll end it. Like, Cullen's done. He's
I need
Fall on the
Alan.
sword.
I need Alan to do an audiobook because he'll just make everyone unbearable to listen to. All the peasants are just like, I don't like this.
You
Alan, I have a
literally
short
know
story
by
you
my
can
voice
narrate
which
if you want.
characters I
And then
like
you have
and
this
which I
creepy
don't
Ben
like.
Lynn that's just like, ooh, come back to my apartment with my lava lamps.
You need to do a Discworld one.
Walls.
Oh, man.
Oh, disgusting! Stop it.
We should just have Alan record like Alan's interpretation of A Time of Dread by John Gwynne.
I hate Cole. Like, I hate him. Like, he's like touching her in the cage. I'm like, dude, like, stop. You're so gross. You're so gross.
Alan,
And
I
if
think
he's
I
her
hate Cole more
father.
than you.
Do what?
I hate Cullen. I think I can hate Cole more than you.
You hate Cullen?
Cole, the Ben Ellen. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him so much.
He's
Well,
the
he's. I think he might be Riv's father, so that's kind of even worse, isn't it?
I mean,
It would
if it
absolutely
is
be
nasty,
that would make it creepier for
That
sure.
would definitely make it worse.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, look, we're probably going to get a big reveal that Israfil was really Riv's father, and he wasn't like this bastion of virtue all the
That kinda
time. And I'm
seems
going to be
more
like,
accurate.
man, this is garbage. No, Israfil, you're a douchebag, but at least you're a consistent douchebag. Like, it undermines all of his douchery if he's going to be like, if he's compromised.
That wouldn't surprise me though, because it's the whole, again, playing on the trope of like their whole like livelihood or religion is based on a lie kind of thing. It's like he creates this world and these rules, but breaks them. Like that would not be surprising at
No,
all.
Israfil, no, he's mean, but he held to his principle. He did what
But
was
it's fine because
necessary.
now you can
Peace in
reveal
our
it because
time,
he's dead.
Alex. Peace in our time.
I did not expect Alan to be so pro Israfil in the stream. I gotta be honest.
It's hard because, like, obviously, like, again, anyone watching, don't be like, oh, Alan's in favor of authoritarian regime. Like, he hates freedom. No. There's a difference between books and real life. But one of the reasons I like fantasies because you can explore this stuff. You can explore these things to where, like, there are positives to monarchy, to absolute rulers, if they're good guys. Like, if the absolute rulers are good guy, guess what? Everyone's life's better because all he did was say, hey, I speak everyone's life being better into existence. Fall in, and everyone's life's better. And the people who don't, the douchebags, cool. Enjoy douche camp where you do stuff for the good people. Sorry, don't be a douchebag. But then you get a bad one. It's like, cool. Everyone will suffer. I will kill everyone in the world. I'm going to be like, I'm going to invite them all to my apartment. And like,
Oh no!
like,
Alan, we've
that's
had
the
that
problem
3
with
times now. Like, enough.
Patrick is not well. You're going to injure him again.
Yeah, you're gonna mess up Petric's digestion.
and that's the problem with monarchy. And so that's like, I love the exploration because, again, my degree is in international politics. So I love theoretical politics way more than like real world politics because real world politics are just toxic and everyone's mad all the time. But I like the study of actual political theory and looking at that and how, like, the nuances of it. And so I really like that. And that's why I'm pro Israfil, because what he's doing is working. Like, he is keeping the banished land safe from the Kadishim. But
who's keeping the banished land safe from him? That's the problem.
exactly. Who watches the watchmen? Like, where are the policemen for kings? Like, no one is stopping him from being this iron-fisted tyrant, even though he is doing exactly what he said he's going to do, and he's doing it well. But people's lives aren't particularly great under that. But it's because he sees the larger threat, and he's this, immortal being, so he doesn't care. He doesn't care about your petty little life. Like, why are you even worried about whether or not you get to bang this person? Who cares? The Kadishim are the big threat. Shut up. No one cares about your farm. No one cares. No one cares that you can't ride around your horse, Bletta. Like, we gotta go. And
we've come full circle. An hour into it, and Alan is hating Bletta.
I'm sorry. I hate it on Bletta. I do like Bletta. And I think I'm going to like Bletta going forward, Sarah. So I
forgive you. I forgive you. It's okay. We have enough characters that we love in common that I feel like you will like Bletta by the end. Yes.
Yeah.
I do agree with this comment by Ian, though, that she gets her wings. She's like, oh, I got to figure out how to use these, and just like flies off the page.
I feel like that's more of Gwynne's cinematic writing. Like he writes so many scenes that are made to be seen on a screen, and so when you get that, like, what a powerful ending image! Like, does it make sense?
Actually,
Not
flies at the screen and the credits roll.
Right.
We cannot have a training montage at the end.
Why not? You should. There should be a training montage.
One thing that really freaked me out, I don't know, I know that Alan and Patrick have watched this. So there is an episode in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood that has traumatized me for my entire life. And I
know what you mean.
It's near the beginning of the show.
And
when we discover these villains that are being made in A Time of Dread, it gave me such like flashback vibes of that. And I was like, this is horrifying all over again.
That's it in Fullmetal Alchemist. It's ultimate trauma. It's so traumatizing.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, side point. Full Metal's awesome. Everybody should watch Full Metal Alchemist.
I really like this book. Like, I like this book a lot.
It's good. It's good. I don't know if I like it more than Malice, because I think, is it you, Alan? You said you liked it more than it was your favorite first book?
I think it's probably my favorite first book, yeah.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I will just say that A Time of Dread has a much better pacing than Malice. The Malice is so consistent, and it never felt like it drags. Everything felt so accessible in Malice, but the special thing about Malice is that we care so much about the characters so quickly. At least for me, it happened that way. That's why, even though there were flaws, we all know that there were flaws in Malice. We all noticed that, but we didn't really care because we care so much about the characters. And I think in The Time of Dread, although the characters aren't as lovable as the Malice, but the pacing are always so consistently good. I actually finished this one within a day.
I mean, it's because one. So this would have been his fifth book at the time. So he's better at writing them at this point. And we already had all the foundation and world building and introductions in Faithful and the Fallen, so he could kind of just hit the ground running. And as Jimmy said, just start telling the story and not really worry about spending time of like, here's this place, here's this place, here's this faction, here's this, and like here's the prophecy, and it was kind of just go. So I mean, the book definitely moves. The pacing is well done. It was just like I said, for me, it was just certain POVs and like the villain aspect of it, which I assume he's gonna fix in book 2. But yeah, I mean, overall, I still liked it. I just didn't like it as much as Faithful and the Fallen, or even Shadow of the Gods. Like as a book 1, I thought Shadow of the Gods is paced obviously just as well because that was relentless. That's John Wick in book form. But like those characters, I liked more overall, I think, than the cast of this one. But we'll see where that goes. That's a different topic. But
I think to me, John Gwynne as a whole, from what I've read, is very good at his continuations and finales. His first book was always good, like Malice, Shadow of the Gods. They were all very, very good. But I think my favorite books of his have been like Ruin and Wrath and A Time of Courage. He's like finishing things and really like sticking the landing.
He's very good at bringing everything together and wrapping it up in a giant explosion of battle.
What works really well in Shadow of the Gods is that tension. It feels very atmospheric. And I think that he developed those skills in A Time of Dread because you do feel dread as you read through the book. You feel that creeping sensation that something bad is going to happen. And I think that I'm so happy to read his books in publication order because you can really see him improve as he goes on. Whether, whatever book is your favorite, there's reasons to love them all, but you cannot argue that he becomes a better author with each book that he writes.
For sure,
I agree with Sarah. Yeah. I mean, for me, his best first book so far is The Shadow of the Gods. And it's because I think he combines what he did really well in The Faithful and the Fallen and what he seems to be doing really well in here, the horror element, the action, all that stuff. And he just a little more... I think he does the work a little bit more efficiently in The Shadow of the Gods as far as the character work goes, because Malice, he does a lot of character building, a lot of world building. He does that much more efficiently, quickly in The Shadow of the Gods, in my opinion, and really got me invested in those characters really fast. So I agree with Sarah that he seems to be getting better and better with each book.
I agree.
Go ahead.
I agree that he's like his writing improves. But Shadow of the Gods is actually my least favorite first book. A large part of that is the Norse inspiration.
We know you hate Vikings.
He hates Vikings.
I mean, I don't hate Vikings, but it's sad that
Yes,
it's
you
true.
do.
Like Norse inspiration just isn't my favorite thing. Like it's just not. But I don't feel, unlike this book, and especially Faithful and the Fallen, the characters in Shadow of the Gods, while I like the lore of Shadow and the Gods a lot. Like the world built on the bones of dead gods. I love that. And I'm super excited to see where the next one's going. None of the characters in Shadow of the Gods are not particularly likable to me. And for me, likability
Like as a person.
yes, like none of them are very pleasant. They're all very dour.
It's because it's Vikings. They're all angry.
It's because it's a harsher
Everything
world
smells
than
like
the
piss.
Vanished Lands, and I understand that harsher worlds breed a certain type of person. But I think in the Banished Lands, like because like the world itself, like it's not PvE, it's not players versus environment in the Banished Lands. Like yeah, it's winter and they're in the north. Okay, that's fine, but it's not like step outside and a ghoul from Norse mythology is going to pop out of some rock and devour your face and then make a mountain. You know, like they don't have that same danger in the Banished Lands as they do in the place that Shadow of the Gods takes place in. And so I don't have a Corbin who's just like immediately just goofy and lovable, or Cullen who's just this rube, or Drem who just, you know, you want to hug and give a donut to, like right at the beginning. And so I think that is what kept it from connecting with me. Now that's a completely subjective experience, and I know that I am in the minority there, but I do completely agree that objectively his writing has improved.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's its best in Shadow of the Gods.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for sure, just like I think we can all agree that even from Faithful and Fallen to Shadow of the Gods, whether you think they're likable people in the world or not, Gwynne does a fantastic job with getting you attached to a character in very few pages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like other than more so than most other authors that I've read, because his books aren't 1,200 pages long. You're not reading a Stormlight book where there's so much happening. It's concise. They're usually like 500 to 600-ish pages, and in that small page count, he does a fantastic job. Even with however many POVs there were in Faithful and the Fallen, where there were like 12, 13 POVs a book, whatever it was. Like a couple of pages here and there, and you really get attached to these characters. And while I don't necessarily love all of them, for the most part, across everything that I've read by him, his characters are great.
Yeah, I think
Alex, I love how you said that in the short page count of 500 to 600 pages.
Because for like an epic fantasy book, that is pretty short.
and for the level of attachment. I mean,
book 2 is what?
I always say it in
400.
every single discussion, but I'll say it again. He's the most
461
writer.
He is.
He's the most
Like this book is 462 pages, 61 pages. This is book 2.
Mine was actually 30 pages shorter than that.
Yeah, you
I
got
remember
gypped.
that.
So 463 pages. Most fantasy authors will make this 1,000 pages, and it won't be as good just because you add descriptions and 600 more pages of crap that doesn't get the. That's why Jimmy. I mean, what he's saying about him being efficient, like he tells this story that you attach to in as many words as is necessary. And that's not even to say that like his prose isn't impressive or like his writing style. Like he's direct and to the point. Like that's the story that he tells, and it gets you through the story. And I personally love the characters along the way. I mean, he's so good at that. And of course, there's action everywhere, and I love that too.
Yeah.
But he's very, very good at getting you attached quickly to characters.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from their relationships, because if you look at, because Jimmy and I talked a lot about Fitz last night, and if you think about the way that some authors build up their characters, they do it by making them these really psychologically complex people with this backstory, and then you get psychologically destroyed. But I think why Gwynne is successful is more in how the characters relate to each other. It's like Philip said earlier, it has more to do with how they intersect with each other and their relationships and what bonds they feel with each other, rather than their own internal complexity. Because there is some exploration of character values in the Faithful and the Fallen, but it's certainly not to the same degree as some other fantasy stories or some other authors. But you still end up feeling really attached to them, and I think that's because you know how much they mean to each other.
Yeah. Another thing Gwynne is great at is building up to these iconic, as Sarah said earlier, cinematic moments. And that's why, Riv's wing sprouting at the end of this book, yeah, it doesn't really logically make sense, but it makes for a great moment, I guess. And so that's why he went with it. And he's great at that. I think he builds up to these iconic moments like Corbin's speech in Wrath. It was Wrath, right? Or was it?
It was in Ruin,
End of Ruin. End of Ruin. Yeah, End of Ruin.
Right before the duel, or right after the duel. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that is a moment you just don't forget. So one of the moments where I teared up even. So he's just so good at building up to these really iconic moments. That's another thing that you'll see in every single Gwynne book so far.
Yeah.
He writes very cinematic.
Yeah.
Yes. Like you're right there on the battlefield. Like when in his battle, like you are swinging with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everyone talks about the Sanderlanche, but I think there is definitely like a Gwynne-lanche when you get.
Oh, for sure. He does the exact same thing. Everything builds up, and then you get to that tipping point of like the last couple chapters, and it's just like, all right, here goes all the combat and character deaths.
It's like a mic drop. He's just like, boom.
Yeah. I think Gwynne is really special because, like, I always have people kind of look at me sideways whenever they're like, who are some of your favorite authors? And I always say Robin Hobb and John Gwynne. Like, those are among my favorites. I have others.
And they're so different.
Yeah, they're so different. And you know what? This is something that Daniel Green actually tweeted out this past week, and I agreed with what he was saying. He was saying people associate easy to read with bad writing, and that's not true.
I agree.
It's the same. It's the same crap that they say about Brandon Sanderson, because like I look at it as it's very efficient to the point and approachable, but that's because he's choosing to write it that way. Like that's how engaging he is.
Let's not do a disservice to Gwynne by comparing him with Brandon Sanderson. What are we doing here? I'm only kind of. No, but I think when mentioning those two people in the same breath, it just I've seen this happen a lot too, and it's partially my fault because whenever I did my reviews, that was like the first time I started getting a little bit of traction on my channel, and for good reason. I was very passionate about the Faithful and the Fallen, and I highlighted the combat a lot. And the reason why is because John Gwynne surprised me. I had never read combat like that. As Alan said, you were right on the battlefield with these people, and you're experiencing these losses, and it feels very heavy. It's all very weighted. And because I harped on that a lot, I've had so many people say, like that's the action writer. And it really bothers me because it's discounting what makes the action special. Yes, technically it's very well written. However, it's the characters and the relationships and the world building and the stakes, specifically the stakes in Faithful and the Fallen, that really come through in the combat. So I feel like I've done a disservice at some point that turns people off who are more into the Fitzes and the slower pace and methodical stories, thinking that this would not be for them and that it's just going to be go, 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 go. And that just isn't the case.
Yeah.
This is probably not a super popular opinion, but one series that did have a lot of fast, specifically one book of the series, the Poppy War was so fast that I did feel like I was missing out on some of those big character moments, in book one specifically.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So, and I think people hear the same thing about Gwynne and they say, oh, that's another one of those. And I just feel like there's such a separation.
There is.
You know what? For me, you make an interesting point, Jimmy. And when I was reading the Poppy War trilogy, I felt like Kwong did a great job with the iconic moments, but there wasn't enough buildup to them for them to feel compelling. Whereas Gwynne is doing the buildup, I think, really, really well. And I did love the Poppy War trilogy overall, but that was something that I felt was lacking, was the proper buildup to that. We got those moments, but they didn't feel as compelling or earned because we didn't have the buildup to them. And this is something that Gwynne obviously does well, because you get to those moments and they really just blow you away. But they wouldn't happen. You're right. Without the proper buildup. Yeah,
he's deceptively deep in what he's building, and he layers it very well. And I'm not disparaging the Poppy War for anyone watching. That's not my intent. I'm just saying I think people couple these type of series together when they hear fast-paced action, whenever they're actually very different and set out to do very different things.
Well, it's like you said with the characters. It's a difference, I guess, because I also love the Poppy War trilogy. You don't necessarily like I like the characters. I like Rin as a character. She's a terrible person.
Yeah.
So it's like the characters in the Poppy War are not nice people. So it's like you grow attached to the characters in Faithful and the Fallen and hear so much that like you don't want to see anything bad happen to them. So when they are in those moments and you're in a shield wall with somebody, you're like, please don't die. Like I like you too much. And that's usually when they will die. But it's because the characters are so compelling that when you get to those action set pieces that they are written very well. You could translate it to a screen. It would look great on an IMAX theater, like watching it happen. It matters because it's not just action for action's sake. Like you care about the characters that are involved in it. It's not just throwaway. It's not just red shirts getting killed. It's not a character that you hate that you just want to see die anyway because they're boring. Whatever it is, like it's aside from Sig's death. Sorry, it's impactful. So
characterization always matters in every
for sure.
Every book by it.
I like that Matt said in the comments like that there was a lot of necessary setup in Malice, particular, to make it believable. These young people aren't immediately killed. Like you don't need that in Shadow of the Gods because all of these people are already seasoned warriors. They've already been dealing with, with this world and how dangerous the world itself is. But these kids in Malice, like you're a blacksmith's son. Like you don't have to do anything except, make horseshoes. And, Cywin, you know how to throw a knife. Congratulations. Like, ooh, so.
It wouldn't be a live stream without Alan belittling hardworking farmers and blacksmiths.
It does sound like I hate the peasants. Shouldn't have been
pro Israfil. I hate
an elitist.
Down with the peasants.
They need to be led.
That's impossible because I'm the revolutionary. I'm the bottom trying to.
We see what kind of leader you are now.
You're a revolutionary.
Long enough to become that I swore to destroy. Oh no! Oh no! Anyway, I agree with that, and I think completely agree. Like the reason that, so R.A. Salvatore writes a lot of battle. Like he describes every freaking move that every inch, like, and he shifted his foot 1 inch to the left, and it's just like it's not all of it's not earned. Like you're fighting random goblins, it's not earned every time. It's just your shtick. But Gwynne has a ton of fighting, and usually a ton of fighting is irritating because it's very repetitive. But in this, he creates such a link with the characters, such a bond with the characters that these fights have stakes and it matters. And he has blessedly proven that each fight is deadly. He'll kill anybody. He don't care. Dead. Not like, oh no, he went down. No. Oh, they're fine. Oh, fake out. Look at that. No. It's like went down. Oh, Father, no! Like, and he's really dead, and that makes you don't have to be lonely at farmersonly.com. But like, because he establishes that he'll kill the characters, the battles have stakes, and each one, even fighting some random group of Kadashim, where it's like in another book, it's like, why are we having this fight? Obviously, they're going to beat the goblins. Like, let's just move on. Come on. Like, we know Aragorn's going to tear up the 3 goblins that went at him. Like, we will stop you. Done. Like, you don't need to see it.
I don't think I remember that scene.
Gwynne will kill somebody. Like, jumped out of the forest. Stab. Oh, no.
I hate goblins.
We have to build a cairn. Like, let's pile rocks on them. Like, anytime. It's a true story.
It is. It's in the Bible.
Oh god.
Okay, so
Alan, you're a legend.
Who, Alan? Yeah,
in my own mind, I guess.
We love Alan. We love Alan. All right, so we're at the hour and a half mark. Do we have any other final thoughts or predictions or anything? I guess the 3 of us that haven't read the series, do we have any predictions for books 2 and 3 other than the Dark Lord eating cheese or talking about cheese or whatever that Abby talked about?
Mute Abby quickly.
I'm just going to hide my face for all these predictions. I don't give anything away.
Just going to need you to review book 2 before we talk about it.
But yeah, Philip and Alan, do you guys have any major predictions right now for whether it be a character death or character arc or something happening in book 2 and 3?
Well, somebody's gonna die.
My daughter does call it the death book.
That's my genius prediction right there. No, I said earlier, I think that it's going to turn out that Cole is Riv's father and that Riv's sister is actually her mother. That's
This is getting weird.
Yeah, I know it's a little weird, but Cole.
I was just saying this is getting weird.
Yeah, Cole is giving me the creepy vibes anyway, so let's
he's
just go all the way here. Yeah.
I predict Cole's gonna have that. There's going to be conflict between the Order of the Bright Star and the Benelim even further now, because I think Cole is gonna he's gonna enact some weird harem law, and he's gonna have make them bring their tribute so he can
go back to the apartment.
So he can lock them in the apartment in his blacklight room. I picture him as this hedonistic ruler who is just anything goes, anything is permitted, like the freaking assassins, nothing is real, everything is permitted. And it's going to come into contact with the real heroes who are the Order of the Bright Star, because they were established by Corbin and are therefore incorruptible. If John Gwynne secretly makes them somehow corrupt, if Bryn turns out to be an agent of Azeroth, I would throw my book and go, biggest shock. I would run around my block for a week. It would be the biggest shock of history, because it is not what anybody's expecting, which is why it's good to know we have the Order of the Bright Star as our true north. This is why, and everyone expects that. That's why if that was ever undermined, it'd be no, it could be destroyed. It is possible it gets destroyed. But yeah, so those are my wild predictions.
One prediction in the romance department. It seems like Gwyn has been doing the build up to a Bleda Riv,
definitely.
Get together.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a wild prediction, but they're going to be a couple.
Is Bleda going to be caught off guard though by the fact that she has wings?
Yeah, I mean, wings. That makes it more interesting.
This video has taken a different turn, Philip.
It'll be that SJM novel.
We need some fan art.
They do it in the air.
God.
You've been reading too much Sarah J. Maas. Stop doing that.
Yeah,
That's why you're not reading any other books.
It's this style.
I know too many people around me who read them, and they're always telling me gross stuff.
I don't think John Gwynne is going to write any fairy sex scenes, so I think we're good.
I hope not. The problem is Cole's not going to like it if Bleda and Riv get hooked up, because Cole clearly wants to get with Riv.
And then Riv is clearly going to kill Cole in the series.
I sure hope she stabs him right in the face, she just full on rages, and it's shut up, and stabs him. Something wittier than shut up.
I hope it's better than that.
I hope it's
Yeah, that's the most undramatic battle speech ever, Alan. I think no one's on their feet cheering that on.
Look, Riv can barely form a sentence that isn't dripping with being mad about something. So I wouldn't trust her to inspire an army. She'd just make them mad.
I have a prediction. I predict a redemption arc for Alex in the series. I think book 2 is going to, because I don't necessarily, I think it was different things, but book 1, I enjoyed it, but I was like, oh, this is different. And then I felt in book 2, I really found my footing. And then book 3 is just tremendous. So,
do you like the second trilogy better than The Faithful and the Fallen, Jimmy?
No. And the reason why is because I actually enjoy a lot of the tropes and prophecy and things like that. While I also enjoy the conflict that we're seeing here of, who's got the right of it and who has to make the hard decisions, I really do enjoy that. One of the reasons why I really enjoyed John Gwynne's writing in The Faithful and the Fallen was I needed just a good old good versus evil. So
yes, thank you.
Yeah, it is so undersold, and that comes from my background in wrestling, because the stories we always told in wrestling is good versus evil. It's the story as old as time, and people undervalue how much nuance you can have even with that. And how well it can
read the gray coats, Jimmy.
Please read Gray Coats.
So sometimes just good versus evil, it sells, and it sold me on that. So I think Faithful and the Fallen, and also the scope is larger. It's more epic. And I think it's very impressive that John did that with his first ever series. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that, and some of it is nostalgia. So,
don't you worry. I mean, the farmers are going to be rising up to defeat the evil overlord of Alan soon. So,
No.
Jimmy, I was just wondering, when you were wrestling, were you the good or the bad guy? I'm guessing the good guy.
I was mainly the good guy. I actually, I mean, it was very Clark Kent. Get beat up the whole time, finally get mad,
Take the glasses off.
But yeah, I actually did wear big dark room glasses out to the ring, and then I would give it to a kid in the front row, and then all the other kids would go to my merchandise table and buy the glasses I was selling.
Did you ever have a heel turn, like a big heel turn story, like Hollywood?
Anytime I was in Canada, I was a heel. Anytime.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Is
like,
that good for America?
yes. Like, what do you want me to do, promoter? And he'd be like, just be American. I'm like, you got it.
Heel turn.
Easy.
Oh, the Newfie pirate. Are you from Newfoundland? If so, welcome.
Another islander.
You are 2.5 hours ahead of me because there are time zones that are on half hours.
Only one. We're the only one. We're all alone here in our independent time zone.
Well, aren't you special?
That's so weird.
Yes.
How do you watch anything on television?
what time is it, Sarah?
Right now, it's 1:17.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's bizarre
That makes no sense. That's silly.
at all.
All right, so then just to wrap this up, we'll ask the same question then to Patrick, Abby, and Sarah that Jimmy just answered. Do you like this trilogy more or less than the quartet of The Faithful and the Fallen?
I definitely love The Faithful and the Fallen more. It's hard to replace the characters in
Yeah.
The Faithful and the Fallen. It's really that. But it's not. I'm not saying that A Time of Courage isn't good. I really loved it. I think it was absolutely amazing and epic. It has John Gwynne's biggest battle scene so far. But yeah, it all comes down always to the characters. It's that simple, really. It's that simple.
Yeah.
I think I'm with Patrick on this one, that The Faithful and the Fallen still has my heart.
Yeah.
Although A Time of Courage is a very epic book.
Yeah.
The conclusion to this trilogy.
If there's one thing I could also say, because we're all saying Faithful and the Fallen. I think.
Okay, so everyone watching this, don't read this series.
Well, no, yeah, that's what I'm saying. A Time of Courage is possibly his best book, though.
Yeah.
So that's the trade-off.
A Time of Courage is fantastic.
And it is a fitting conclusion to the Banished Land. Very fitting.
As a whole, can we just take them as 7 and love the whole series?
That's
Yeah.
I usually talk about it as 7 book.
No, you're actually not allowed to. It's illegal.
It's my
No,
second
it's
favorite.
allowed.
It's probably my second favorite completed series, I'd say.
Yeah. Nice.
Number
Well,
one.
any final thoughts, guys, on A Time of Dread until we meet again, next month, and talk about A Time of Blood, assuming Alan can fit it in.
Well, thanks for being an awesome host, Alex.
Thank you guys for doing this. It's very easy to host. I click a button, and I turn the broadcast on, and then we talk. You guys make it easy. So,
Very reminiscent of the great Philip Chase. I don't know if you guys have seen his channel, but he's a doctor.
I've heard of him.
is he?
Who is
Dr. Fantasy.
Doctor Fantasy. I love it.
That's a cooler doctor. I gotta say, I would trade mine in for a Doctor of Fantasy.
So next broadcast, you'll just compare your degrees against each other while we're talking. Sounds
The
like.
ultimate showdown. I bet my degree is bigger. They gave us the big, you must be a narcissist degree in medical school. It's bigger than your
Awesome.
whole house, essentially.
Well, every time Sarah talks, I want to go back to school and learn psychology so I can learn how to analyze books better. So, yeah.
Yeah, she brought it last night, man.
Yeah.
It is
Oh,
always
yeah.
insightful, for sure.
Yep.
All right. Well, I guess that'll wrap up our Time of Dread discussion until we meet on whose channel are we on next? Jimmy, Sarah's? Who are we doing next?
Jimmy or Sarah?
I
Who's
vote
doing
Sarah.
the next one?
I vote
Sure,
Sarah.
I can do the next one because I would really like to be able to talk for A Time of Courage. So
There you go.
Fair enough.
All right. So then we will be on Sarah's channel next month when we figure that detail out. I'll just keep paying for this. We can use mine if I'll just give you the login to this, but we'll do A Time of Blood on Sarah's channel next month, guys. So thank you everybody for watching. This book is good, and we'll see where the rest of the series. That was weird, wasn't it? We'll see where the rest of the series takes us. So I'm looking forward to A Time of Blood. Until next time, guys.
Bye bye.
Keep
Bye,
reading.
everybody.
Bye.